I woke up to the sound of my brother, Liam, dry heaving in the back seat. It was 3 a.m., freezing, and I was crammed between my mother and father in the front, my head resting awkwardly against the window. We'd been parked for 4 hours on the side of a dimly lit rest stop parking lot. The interior of our beat-up old sedan smelling faintly of stale coffee and desperation. My teeth were chattering so hard I thought I might chip one. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was that the moment I opened my eyes, I saw her. Alara, my father's much younger, very pregnant fiancée, curled up asleep in the back with Liam. I stared at the faint glow of the rest stop sign filtering through the back window, illuminating her face, and the immediate, icy cold thought that hit me was, they chose her over us. Was I wrong for the calculated, absolutely devastating thing I did next? The one thing that tore our makeshift family apart for good and left them stranded? Tell me, honestly, if you would have done the same thing to save yourself. It all started 7 months ago, the day my mother, Sarah, lost her job. My father, Mark, had been working as an independent contractor, and his income was already erratic. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. A sudden, unexpected downturn in the local construction market coupled with my mother's layoff sent us spiraling. Bills started piling up, the stress was suffocating, and the fighting became a nightly soundtrack. I was 19, trying to hold down 2 part-time jobs while taking community college classes, and my little brother, Liam, was 14 and just starting high school, a sensitive kid who felt every ounce of the tension. Then Dad met Alara. She was a waitress at the diner where he occasionally stopped for coffee and, crucially, she had a trust fund. Not a huge one, but enough to offer a temporary safety net. Or at least that's what he convinced himself. The affair started quietly, with late nights and vague excuses, but it exploded into our lives when Mom found a text message. The fight that followed was apocalyptic. It ended with Mom screaming, "Take your precious little gold digger and leave us alone." And Dad looking utterly defeated yet resolute, walking out the door with a single duffel bag. Within a month he filed for divorce, and a month after that he announced he was marrying Alara, who was now suddenly conveniently pregnant. This was the moment our financial situation went from bad to catastrophic. My mother was unable to find work quickly, the house was underwater, and the bank gave us the final eviction notice. We had 3 weeks. 3 weeks to pack up the only home we had ever known. It was humiliating. We sold almost everything. The final day, seeing the sold sign hammered into the lawn, I remember the feeling of absolute hollowness. The plan Dad had presented was this. Alara's trust fund was tied up in some complicated offshore accounts, and while they waited for a payout, they were temporarily living in her tiny, one-room apartment across town. Since Mom, Liam, and I were technically homeless, Dad convinced Mom that for the short term, just a few weeks until they could access the money and buy a place big enough for all of us, we should sell the remaining furniture and live out of the car. The car, a cramped, 10-year-old Toyota sedan. He pitched it as a family adventure, a way to save every penny. Mom, broken and exhausted, agreed to this insane, deeply demeaning proposition. I didn't agree, but I had no power. I was a child in this scenario, forced to comply with my parents' terrible decisions. The first few days were manageable, almost novel in a sick, twisted way. We'd shower at the local gym using a free trial pass, eat cheap fast food burgers, and park in brightly lit, safe-looking parking lots. But the novelty wore off instantly. The lack of sleep was brutal. My limbs were constantly numb. Liam was missing school, claiming to be sick, because how do you explain showering in a gym and sleeping in a Toyota to your friends? Then came the big trip. Alara's estranged wealthy aunt had died in a state 3 days' drive away, and Dad, ever the opportunist, insisted we all drive there. The aunt's will was to be read, and Alara was convinced she'd been left a massive inheritance that would solve all our problems instantly. Dad said it would be good for us to see a change of scenery, and that we would bond as a family. Bond. We were sleeping in a metal box and driving across the country with the person who broke up our marriage. My mother resisted fiercely, but Dad used the money card. He promised that if she came, he would immediately give her $2,000 from his last contracting job to help her start over. No questions asked, as soon as the trip was done. That was the leverage. That measly amount of money was enough for my broken, desperate mother. So there we were, me, Mom, and Dad in the front, and Liam squeezed into the back, surrounded by our 2 remaining duffel bags. But as we were about to pull out of the parking lot, Elara showed up. She had a massive suitcase, a tiny dog, and a look on her face that said she was the queen of the road. Dad opened the trunk, which was already full, and then, in a casual, heartbreaking move, he pointed to the back seat. "Sarah, honey, you and Kate switch with Liam. Elara needs to stretch out her legs, and the dog needs a lap." My mother's face drained of color, but she simply nodded, her pride long gone. That first night, we drove 12 hours straight. The 5 of us crammed into that small car. Elara, 7 months pregnant, sprawled diagonally across the entire back seat, taking up far more room than necessary, with her ridiculous little yipping dog on her chest. Liam was crushed against the door. Mom and I were forced to take turns sleeping in the middle seat, which, if you've ever done it, is a torture chamber. The next day it was worse. Elara had a bout of morning sickness, which Dad treated like a medical emergency. Every time we stopped for gas, he'd fawn over her, bringing her water and snacks. He acted like she was the only pregnant woman in the world, while my mother and I were basically invisible, shadows in his peripheral vision. Liam started to withdraw completely, staring silently out the window, his teenage angst compounded by this ridiculous situation. We were halfway through the trip, deep in the middle of nowhere, and the reality of our new life, or lack thereof, hit me like a physical blow. Dad had utterly, completely prioritized his new family over his old one, and he was making us suffer for it. So that's the horrific situation I was in. 2 days of pure misery, watching my father cater to the woman who stole him, all while my mother silently wept and my brother withered in the corner. I was 19, trying to be an adult, and I realized I had to be the one to protect my family, the real family. I had to break us free. Before I tell you what happened next, the thing I still wrestle with every single day, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have played the martyr and continued the drive? Or would you have risked everything to strike back? Tell me. We stopped at the rest stop, the one where I woke up. Dad said we needed 4 hours of sleep before the final push. He insisted on parking right by the road, not the main parking lot, for a quick getaway. As usual, Elara claimed the entire back seat, which meant Mom and I were sharing the front middle space, a feat of human contortion. My dad, bless his exhausted, selfish heart, was instantly asleep, snoring softly against the steering wheel. Mom was asleep, too, her head nestled against the passenger window. I, however, could not sleep. I was too cold, too angry, and too filled with a quiet, burning resolve. I looked over at my father, the man who used to read me bedtime stories, and saw only a stranger who had abandoned us. I looked back and saw Elara, comfortable and oblivious, and a wave of pure, unadulterated hatred washed over me. Then Liam dry heaved. That sound, that pathetic, sick noise from my brother, was the final straw. I quietly slipped my hand into Dad's pocket, feeling for the key. He always kept the spare key in his other pocket, but he'd been so tired he hadn't moved it. I felt the familiar shape of the car key. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would wake everyone up. Slowly, inch by agonizing inch, I pulled my arm free, the key now cold in my palm. The next few minutes were a blur of adrenaline and pure stealth. I had to get Mom and Liam out without waking Dad or Elara. I gently shook Mom's shoulder, whispering her name. "Mom, wake up. We have to go." Her eyes fluttered open, confused and disoriented. I put a finger to my lips and subtly nodded toward Dad. She looked at him, then at Elara, and finally, her eyes met mine and somehow she understood. The sheer desperation in my face must have conveyed the severity of the situation. She quietly unbuckled her seatbelt. Getting Liam out was harder. He was deep asleep and heavy. Mom and I had to work together, leaning into the back, carefully sliding him out from the seat, over the center console, and out the passenger door. Elara stirred slightly, murmuring something about the cold, but didn't fully wake up. We finally got Liam to his feet. He was groggy but walking. I held the keys up to Mom, a silent question. She looked back at the car, at the man she had been married to for 20 years, and shook her head, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I can't," she whispered. "He's still your father." I looked at her, then back at the car. Dad's phone was on the dashboard, charging. He needed his phone to navigate. And I needed money. The $2,000 promise was gone the moment I decided to leave. I reached back into the car, yanked the phone off the charger, and grabbed the one thing I knew they couldn't replace quickly: the car registration and insurance documents, which were tucked into the glove compartment. I didn't take the spare key. I took the phone and the paperwork. Then the final, most deliberate act of vengeance. I stepped away from the car, walked over to a cluster of trash bins 50 feet away, and threw the car keys, Dad's phone, and the registration into the very bottom of the dirtiest bin I could find. We walked. We walked for what felt like an eternity, Liam half asleep and leaning on Mom, me carrying the bags and the weight of my decision. The nearest town was 2 miles away, and by the time the sun started to rise, painting the sky in a muted pink, we reached a small gas station. I used what little cash I had left to buy a bus ticket for Mom, Liam, and myself back to our home city. We had no money for food, but we were going home. We got on the bus, and as the engine hummed and we pulled away, I finally felt a release, a sliver of peace I hadn't felt in months. The aftermath was exactly as chaotic as I expected. Dad called me 12 hours later from a payphone. He had found the keys. Some nice, early-rising man had seen them sticking out of the trash and fished them out, but the registration was gone. He was furious. A towering, screaming rage. "You ruined everything. How are we supposed to drive without the insurance and registration? Do you know how much trouble I'm in?" I calmly told him that he had ruined everything the moment he chose Alara over us. The moment he forced his original family to sleep in a car with his new one. I told him we were safe, and we weren't coming back. He had to figure it out. Later, my mom ended up staying with an old friend from college, and I took an extra shift, saving every penny. Liam returned to school. It took 3 months, but we finally saved enough to rent a small, 2-bedroom apartment. My parents' divorce was finalized 3 weeks ago. Dad and Alara? They made it to the aunt's funeral. She got nothing. The trust fund remained inaccessible, and without the registration, Dad got a hefty fine, and the car was impounded at a tow yard for weeks before they could finally sort out the paperwork. They were left with nothing. I hear they're living in a shelter now. I don't feel guilty. I did what I had to do to save my mother and brother. I burned the bridge, but I built a lifeboat. So that's it. That's the whole mess. The story of how a girl, forced to sleep in a car because of her father's choices, took back control of her life and the lives of her family. I sacrificed my relationship with my father, but I saved my mother and brother from a life of homelessness and humiliation. Like this video if you were on my side and think I made the right decision. Subscribe for more stories like this where I deep dive into the darkest corners of human conflict and reveal the shocking truth. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far, or was my revenge justified? I'll see you all in the next story.